Hi guys, welcome back to the shop. Hey, today I'm going to do a crankshaft project, and this one's a little bit different than the ones I've done in the past. It's pretty much a 1 year, and it may even be a short year setup. It's actually for a Suzuki 125. It's an RM125, and I've got two crankshafts. One of them is supposed to be the one that came out of the engine, and it's got, should we say, some irreversible repairs done to it. So we'll be using it as primarily a parts crankshaft, and really the only thing that we may be able to use out of it is the rod itself. The rest of it is pretty well, it's just no good. But anyhow, the owner got me a new, not a new, but one off eBay, but it appears to be different, and in some ways. So we've got to figure out what we need and get it ordered. But right now what we need to do is figure out what we have to work with and how we are going to work with it. So I'm gonna show you kind of the what the issues are, and we're going to take it over and put it in the lathe and measure up everything just like we always do. Check them before we tear them apart, and see where we need to go from there. But it's going to take some research, and I'm just going to kind of report back to what I find and let them run the parts down, and then when they get the parts, then we can put it back together. But right now it's looking like a project. So let me get you overhead and we'll take a look at it. All right, this is supposedly the original one, and here is kind of the irreversible repair. It's had the sprocket welded onto it, so I don't know why people do that, but it may have been the threads were bad or something from something coming apart, and they just wanted to run it. We used to do stuff like that, and I'm sure that things are still done like that sometimes. But anyhow, this is supposed to be the original, and from what I can tell right now anyhow, the upper portion of the rod looks to be okay. Let me get another light here. Actually, this one right here may work good. I'm hoping you can see in there. I don't see any bad spots, just normal looking wear in there. But if we look closer to the other side of the crankshaft, we see that it's really beat up here. You'll never get a key on that, and or never get a flywheel on it. Nut, rather. The sealing surface and everything is really pretty nice, but this pretty much took out this half, and this side over here, this took out this half. So really all we can do is try to separate it, and since this is supposed to be the original, we can take all our measurements for this connecting rod. And I've kind of looked at it a little bit, and this is a TCTS rod, and it looks a lot the same from what I'm seeing, but not when I get to looking in here. This looks bigger to me. And one of the first things I did was I took this and just kind of stretched it out here, and just a rough measurement and I'm getting, it's probably 130 is probably what it's supposed to be. And I take the TS-TC rod, and as you can see, there's a little bit of difference there. This one here, let's see, it'll measure out at 129. It may be pretty close. What I'm thinking, what I'm seeing right here is I think this has got a bigger bearing in it down here. Now it's got the same pin. See, the pin is a 19 millimeter. If you just take a caliper and do a down and dirty check, yeah, it's kind of hard. It's sticking up on this end here a little bit, but that's the gist. 19 millimeters is what I think it is. And this one measures the same. But this rod on the top end measures roughly 21, and this one measures about 18. Yeah, 18. Now the TS-TC rod also measures 18 up here, and we don't know. I know that the lower pin on the TS-TC is 19 millimeters, so I don't know what, maybe it has a different size bearing here or something. That's what we've got to determine. But as of right now, we know that both of these lower pins are 19 millimeter. Unless one of them's got a step in it or something, but I don't think it does. And we know that there's nothing about this crankshaft that's any good at this point, unless when we get it apart, the rod is. Okay, this is just something that you can fix these. You've got to pretty much just cut it off, drill into it, and put a stop in it, and pin it, and press it in with Loctite. You can fix it, but it's a lot of work, and there's probably it's probably easier to find another crankshaft. Certainly easier, and would be cheaper. Now this is the one that they bought, and it's got the bigger upper. Now this one looks okay. Out here I did notice we've got some flat threads right here, but that's nothing that chasing those threads should fix. Those should be 10 millimeter 125. So we'll chase that and make sure before we even start anything. But the one thing that kind of concerns me is the sealing area here. This area right here is where the seal runs. So just beyond that to the outside, it's looking pretty rough here. If that seal, it doesn't run in here exactly where it is now, or has been, it may not seal very good for very long. But this one, if I was doing it for myself, I would probably machine this off and sleeve it just like I have some of the other ones that I've done. But I think it'll work if you can get the seal back in the same spot. Now I've measured this, and so far all the bearing journals are the same. The width, now there again, I don't have any data on these crankshafts, so when you don't have any kind of data at all, you need to measure them. And I've got about 56 0.08. Okay, and I just write it on here, what it is at the pin, and then I take and put it at 180 from the pin and measure it again, and I've got about 55.97. And this original one, same thing. This one is 55.68 at the pin, and 180 out, we're at about 55.78. And I've made notes of all those readings. So what I want to do now is, since this is the one that we're hopefully going to build up, I'm going to set it over in the lathe and just see what it looks like before we tear it apart, just like I always do. So let me get you over there. All right, I've got it set up here in the lathe between the centers, and I've got it zeroed out here. So we'll just run it. Okay. Now what I'm seeing here is what we see in a lot of them sometimes when we're setting them up, is that if you'll take note, they're high in the same spot. It's almost just a little above the pin here. So that's telling us we've got either a spread or a pinch situation where we're going to have to come in here. My first thought would be to pinch it. Let's see, is that right? If it's winged up like this, I think we need to pinch it down here to pull it in. It's not too bad, but it is, you certainly want it closer than this. I'm getting 3 on the mag side and 4 on the clutch side. And see, if I go back, it goes back to 0. Both of them do right there. So it's not a situation where these two halves are spun from one another. They are, they may be, but the first thing we need to take care of is this, where you've got the two high in the same place. And that needs to be pinched here. Actually, I think it needs to be widened, because I kind of squeeze it there and I see it go back up. That's not a great indicator, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. But anyhow, we're not doing that right now because we're going to tear this apart. But I'm going to take a note of our readings here. Just even though these readings are not going to mean beans in a bowl to you for reassembly, I always take note of every reading. And if you run into problems, then you've got a lot more information to deal with. So even though and I know that I'm not going to need these, I'm still going to take note of everything that I find. Okay, before I do anything, I'm going to go ahead and chase that thread there just to make sure that we don't have any other issues. Yeah, doesn't appear to be any big deal. We just clean up those threads that were kind of flattened there. Just like that. Yeah, looks good. Just hit it real quick with a wire brush. All right. Okay, next thing I just noticed, and I should have already measured that, is I can tell just by looking at them that these crankshaft halves are not the same size. This is the replacement one, and they're measuring about 8709, and the original one is measuring in at 9128. So this is not, it's just not going to work. This one, I think, will go in there because everything that I'm measuring is the same, but there's going to be a lot of extra space. You know, the width was pretty much the same, and I can measure both of these and they're the same. I can't get to this one over here to see what the bearing surface and the total length is, and the step. That's where the seal will ride. I can probably kind of get the total length. It's roughly the same. You know, I just don't know what we're running into here. This, like I said, this is the top end bearings are different. This one here, just the replacement one, it's just pretty much, I'm thinking it's like a TS or a TC. I've got a TS crankshaft out in the shed, I think. Maybe I'll go get that and see if I can measure it up. But right now, you know, the only thing that we may be able to utilize is this rod. And then, you know, we don't want to tear up a whole bunch of stuff. I'm going to have to contact the owner. It seems that this 1 year thing is a little more problem than we suspected, or what he was sold as an RM crank on eBay was not. But I'm thinking that it probably is, because this crank, the upper bearing is of a different size, bigger. So it's, you know, I just don't know, because this is what we've got here. I'm gonna have to do some more research. Okay, I went out and grabbed a crankshaft from a TS 125, and you can readily see that there's some differences. We've got splines here, no splines here. We've got a key. The other side, the snout, this is the TS, a lot longer. That's probably mostly because of a flywheel and point system versus the CDI. And let's just take a quick measurement here on the flywheel. 86, 69. And 87. So that's probably about the same as far as the halves go. Let's see what the measurement is on this one. For some reason it's looking a little bit wider, but I don't know what it is. 56. And 56, okay. so it's okay. But you're not going to use one of these. You need this snout off of this one. So there are some differences, that's for sure. Okay, so absolutely nothing of use on this, on the original one, except perhaps the rod. So what we will go ahead and do is split this, and at least we'll have access to the rod for all the measurements. And other than that, we already know all the measurements here. So hopefully that will give us enough information where we can take care of ordering parts or whatever we need to do. But we do need to get this out so that we can see, number one, if it's any good, and number two, to get the measurements for a new bearing and thrust washers. Hopefully you can come up with a different crank, because neither one of these are going to work. The TS one won't, and there's just nothing you're going to be able to use here either because of the size of the crankshafts. Everything else looks pretty close, but you know, that's just, you're not going to have the proper weight, and you're going to have way too much volume in the cases. So let's go over to the press and we'll see if we can get this one apart. Okay, I've run into a little problem. This is my plate I usually use to separate these, and this one is a little too tight for this to go into. It's the first time I've had an issue with that, and it's a few thousandths. This is the other one that he sent me. It goes in okay, and the one for the TC goes in fine. I've done a lot of these, but for some reason the original one out of his bike will not go in all the way. So I'm going to have to machine a few thousandths out of this one, maybe about 10. And I don't want to take too much out because I don't want to make it too thin. But I'm going to set it up here in the Bridgeport and see if I can take enough off to get that in there. Okay, see where we're at here. Just bring it up till it touches. About right there. I'm just going to put a little oil on it. Just not quite centered there. I need to take just a little bit more. Take another another 1.5 thousandths here. I think that might clean it up. Yep, looks like it'll just about do it. Okay, got it over here in the press. We're going to go ahead and I've got it down to where it's in contact, and we'll go ahead and start our push, and I've got a hold of it on the bottom. Okay, it's starting to go. Rod's all clear. There's our half, and the other piece is here in my hand. So we'll take it over and look at it on the bench. All right, we've got it off over here, and I kind of see what the deal was with my fixture. It was digging into this plug that was right here. So it was not cut off flush, evidently. And I noticed this one over here turned at some point. So I think I'd be for knocking them out. And see, this one's loose. Look at it. You don't want those coming undone in there. I'd be for taking those, of course this thing's all beat up anyway, but I'd be for taking them out and re-epoxying them or whatever. But that was my issue there. But that being said, when I get the crank out, or the rod, it looks just like this TC rod, exactly. This is the one that come out of it. It says 120-2 on it, and this is the TC rod. It's got the Suzuki S on it. This one here doesn't. And we go to measure these. And I'm getting 2504 millimeters here on the Suzuki, on the RM rod, and 2505 on the TCTS rod. And then we take a look at the upper. We've already done that, and it's 1802 and 1803. And you get the overall length here. That's 129.14. Of course, this overall length doesn't make a whole lot of difference. It's the center to center that does. 29.97. If I can get on there straight. 130. But the center to center is the real thing that counts, and it's kind of hard to measure that like this anyway. But I'll just about bet you it's supposed to be 100. Right at it. And that's probably what this one is. So I'm probably going to go spend a little time in the Pro-X. Actually, I think I've got one of these along from Japan. I normally keep those around for the Suzuki 125s. Let's see, what else was I going to do here? The 19 millimeter pin. This is an old one here. No use putting a bunch of dirt in it. Yeah, fits right on there. Let me go rummage around and see if I can find a new one. Okay, so I've got a long rod, which is, they're made in Japan. They're a replacement rod for these. And it's exactly the thing as far as fit goes. It's a little beefier at the upper end. (1803). 25, and I bet the weight's about the same. Let me get my scale. All right, let's take a look at the Suzuki rod. This is the one that came off of it, the RM, 3.95 ounces, and the long rod, 3.95 ounces. I think it's of my opinion that that's the replacement rod for it. But that being said, I think the rod that come out of it is probably okay to use. It just needs new bearings and and thrust washers. And in this case, it's going to need some new halves. And the ones that we've got here are not going to work because they're too small. Can't get that off there. Doesn't need to come off. So we need RM crankshaft. I just don't see, there's nothing we can use off of this replacement one. It's just too small in diameter to start with. All the ends are the same, but this part here is too small. You know, it's what would that do? I would have to say that it's you're going to have a lot of extra volume in your crankcase, because these measured in at 87, yeah, 87.18, and these were 91.75. 87.10, 91. So what about 5 or 6 millimeters difference? I'm just not sure. This one, I can tell that this bearing is different size on this. You know, it's a bigger rod altogether. This end's bigger. This, I'm betting, was the 76, which was probably changed mid-year. They basically just used the TC rod, bearing, pin, thrust washers, and later on they changed the stroke, and probably the 77 model released in late 76 had a longer stroke, and it did I ever measure that? And they put a beefier rod in it. Yeah, let's see here if we can get a, yeah, see, I'm getting 131 on that one. Yeah, it's not a, well, it's almost 132. And this one is 130 probably, 129. So there's a little bit difference in the rod length. I would have to look and see what the difference in bore and stroke was, but I remember the owner telling me that there was a difference. So I think we're kind of at a standstill here until we can come up with something else. You know, this crank would probably work, but it's you're going to have a little difference in weight. I kind of wished I had weighed this other one. I guess I can probably get it all on there. Let's see if I can. Well, let's just measure it piece by piece here. So if we got 4450. And this includes, well, it includes the bearing and everything, so that's not going to give us a good measurement. Yeah, good weight. We know it's going to be, this one is going to be less because it's, what, about 4 or 5 millimeter difference in diameter. So I think it's up to the customer on this one. I can probably make this work, but you're going to have more volume, which is not going to be good for, usually you're trying to eliminate volume, especially on a racing bike. That's why they plug these, is to eliminate that volume. You're wanting to get all the fuel into the engine instead of hanging around down here. They call that windage, I think. It robs horsepower when there's too much oil or too much fuel flopping around in there. It's a drag on the engine. So I think this one's too small. It would rev quicker because it is smaller. But I think with the volume difference, I don't know whether you'd gain anything or it might be a wash. Okay, just to kind of recap what our problem is here. Now it's the diameter. This is the original one that's had the repairs done to it. And this is supposed to be the original crankshaft out of the motorcycle. And we're looking at 91, 95 or something like that. Actually, it's less than that, I think. It's kind of hard to measure. Yeah, 91, 35 or something like that. And the other one that you sent, or that he sent, is 8729. So we're 4.5 millimeters difference in the diameter. Okay, so what's 4.5 millimeters? That's 4.5 millimeters. So that's quite a bit. So you're going to have quite a bit more volume in the crankcase. Again, that's why they plug them, is to take care of the volume, to get that volume as low as they can. So it'd be kind of defeating the purpose of those. But I'm thinking it might work. It's definitely going to be lighter. I can't weigh it because we've got all this stuff still here. I could take all that off, but you're probably still going to be off because I would have to cut this, so it'd be severing this shaft over here to get that piece off, so I could get all the rest of this off. I can certainly do that, but the weight is still going to be off a little bit. So I think in my own mind that we need to try to locate another crankshaft, and when you do so, just try to make sure that you're getting one that is around 91, 25 or something like that millimeters in diameter, and everything else the same. So there you have it, guys. The crankshaft in question is different than the one that he sent me for parts. It might be able to be used. I don't know what that extra, or actually it's less diameter, less material on the crank. So there's going to be a big change in the volume in the crankcase. The rods appear to be the same as a TCTS. The bearing, the pin, everything looks to be the same as the TC model, but the crank itself is different. I had one and it's got a longer snout, and on the other side you need to have the splines, and the TC on this side does not have it. It uses a keyway. The crank halves are actually they're the same as the replacement one you sent me, the spare one. So these two, the halves are the same, but the ends are all different. So the RM crank is it's unique, but it's using the pin, the bearing, the rod. All that comes from the TCTS. So hey, I don't know what he wants to do, but we've got to. I think we need to get parts. We need to get crankshaft halves, or just another crankshaft with the 91.35 halves on it. So hey, thanks for going along on the ride, and we'll see you next video.